أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome everybody to Community Update number 36. Today we have a special guest with us today. But without any further delay, or before we take up any more time, because we know that Salat al-Maghrib is around the corner. These are shortened community updates, about 25-30 minutes. So let's begin straight away with our dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A'udhu bi kalimatillahi at-tammati min sharri ma khalaq. A'udhu bi kalimatillahi at-tammati min sharri ma khalaq. A'udhu bi kalimatillahi at-tammati min sharri ma khalaq. Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma ismihi shay' fi al-ardi wa la fi as-sama' wa huwa as-sami'ul 'alim. Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma ismihi shay' fi al-ardi wa la fi as-sama' wa huwa as-sami'ul 'alim. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. تحصنت بذي العزة واعتصمت برب الملكوت وتوكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت. اللهم اصرف عنا الوباء بلطفك يا لطيف إنك على كل شيء قدير. تحصنت بذي العزة واعتصمت برب الملكوت وتوكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت. اللهم اصرف عنا الوباء بلطفك يا لطيف إنك على كل شيء قدير. تحصنت بذي العزة واعتصمت برب الملكوت وتوكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت. اللهم اصرف عنا الوباء بلطفك يا لطيف إنك على كل شيء قدير. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Welcome everybody to our community update. And today I just want to remind everyone, give everyone just a little reminder, because reminders benefit the believers, that we're in a time now, there's going to be a lot of changes. Everyone knows that there are going to be a lot of changes. It's going to be a time where the changes, I don't think anyone in the world knows the direction where things are headed. And this happens, but it's oftentimes not comfortable. It's oftentimes something that worries people, makes them a bit nervous, and also people get affected. Around the time of the world wars, there was a lot of change and people were affected adversely. But just because bad things happen and hardships occur does not necessarily mean that everyone will be permanently harmed by them. And the Muslim has an idea that there could be lesser harm on the outside, and there can be an inner worse harm. The ones who will be protected from this are the ones who are in constant dua, in constant remembrance, not just remembrance of Allah, dua, and pleading Allah Ta'ala for our protection. And therefore, the one who does this will be somebody that is protected from the long term and from the depths of the hardship, and will only come out with a few scratches. And that's, inshallah, where we would hope to be. One further announcement: it is with a heavy heart that I inform you that the father of our dear sister Elif, his name was Ramazan Kasapaglu, has passed away. All right? This is an uncle that you all saw every Sunday at the masjid, attending with his son and daughter and his wife, the Awalim scholarship track. He was such a jovial. The kids were jovial man. The kids will remember him for giving them little pieces of candy, and being always having a smile on his face. With great sadness, he has passed away. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to enter him into Jannat al-Firdaus, and to make his grave a slice of the piece of the pieces of paradise, a garden from the gardens of paradise. And may Allah Ta'ala not touch him with any hardship in his grave, judge him on the best of his deeds. He raised, mashallah, a strong family upon Islam, and we ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to judge him by the best of his actions. Today we have a guest from Philadelphia. We have somebody who, mashallah, it really makes Muslims proud. He's an attorney, not any attorney, a prosecutor. He's a prosecutor, not any type of prosecutor. He's a U.S. federal level prosecutor in the state of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, stationed in Philadelphia, but he's at the federal level. Okay. Well, I'm not trying to give anyone hints that if you have any issues, send Shuaiyb a text. He's not going to solve them for you. Don't get into issues. That's the answer. But mashallah, it makes me so proud to see someone so accomplished. And you'll never know if you hung out with Brother Shuaiyb. You'd never know that he was at that level, but he is. So please listen attentively to what our guest and what our brother has to say. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is my pleasure to be with you today. Dr. Shadi asked me to come and speak, so I'm going to do my best to just give some advice, general advice, and also receive some advice from you all, inshallah ta'ala. Um, it's very interesting times that we're dealing with. It was curious that a few days ago, one of my supervisors, a white female, called me. She sent me an email and said she couldn't find my number because I just recently began working there. So the number my name is not on their, I guess, their cell phones because I started during the pandemic. So nobody was at the office to update their phones. So she sent me an email. She asked me to send her a an email with my number. So I gave her a call because I had her number on my phone. And I was thinking it had something to do with work, a case that I'm working on, or something I forgot to do, or I was a little nervous. And when I called her, she wanted to talk about the the current events, about the protests and the issues of um, black men and police departments across the country. So it was interesting that she took the time to call me and listen intently on what I had to say because she listened to me for a while. We spoke for a while, um, and so it's interesting what's going on during these times. But Alhamdulillah, I think it's also interesting that Allah gave us Ramadan in the middle of the pandemic, uh, allowed us to spend some time together as family members to fast and to pray and to get closer to Him and to erase some of our bad deeds and to work on ourselves. And then after Ramadan, He gave us a little more on our plates with the death of George Floyd, which highlighted other deaths that have occurred not only this year but in the previous years that were not only is I mean, every murder is unjust, but I think the issue that people have is not that the murder is unjust, it's the reaction of the system to the perpetrator of the murder. And in this case, it is a police officer, and in many of the cases that we are dealing with, it is police officers. So, one, as Muslims, we need to understand and remember that we always need to remember Allah first. Right? Nothing that is happening outside of the control of Allah. As the dua that Dr. Shai just read at the end said, that Allah has power over all things. Kulli shay'in qadir. Allah has power over all things. So we know that nothing is outside the power of Allah. So that should give us some ease in our hearts that we are worshiping the one who's in control. We are not left to our own devices, and this is not some outside power. This is not the devil taking over the world, and we're praying for Allah to intervene in some other plan. Nobody has power except Allah, so we are dealing with something that Allah has given us, and everything that Allah does is with a wisdom, and is our job as Muslims is to remember that and deal with things in kind, right? Um, Also, so knowing that, what are we dealing with, right? I don't know the demographics of those who are in the audience. Of course, some of you know from firsthand experience what we're dealing with. Some of you know from secondhand experience, and maybe others do not know at all because they just don't, they're not aware of it. But one thing I always like to say when I talk about this subject is we want to separate two things. And it's always a red herring that many people bring up when they discuss this issue, which is why I started the way I did, that this is not about black on black crime. And a lot of people bring up black on black crime as if it is something specific to black people, right? Anywhere you go, the crime is going to be from one person in the community that looks like the other person in the community, right? So crime in Japan is Japanese on Japanese crime. crime in Turkey is Turkish on Turkish crime, right? Crime, you're going to commit crimes against people who are in your closest to you in proximity, right? But again, when someone commits a crime in my city of Philadelphia, and if it's two people of the same race, that person is going to be prosecuted. They're going to be, the case is going to be investigated. They're going to find the suspect. If they believe that person committed the crime, they're going to arrest that person, or at least ask the prosecutor if they can arrest that person, arrest them, and then prosecute them. And that is essentially what people are asking for, or one of the things people are asking for. They're asking for these police officers to be prosecuted if prosecution is appropriate, to the same with the same zeal as non-citizens are prosecuted. And also, they're asking for reform in the way that police officers police certain communities, because we know that there's a certain way that um, police officers treat people depending on who they are. It's like, for if you can't understand, it's kind of like if you pull over two cars who were speeding and they both ran a red light. You pull over the first car, and that person is a nobody, meaning that you don't know their name, you don't know who they are, they hold no status. You give this person a ticket. You get to the next car, and that person happens to be the mayor or the mayor's son, right? If you treat the mayor's son or the mayor differently because they are the mayor or the mayor's son, that's wrong, obviously, right? We don't, there's not much to think about. Every citizen should be treated the same based on their actions, not based on who they are. Um, just as Allah says that what you look like doesn't make you better than someone. What you have doesn't make you better than someone. Only your deeds make you better than someone in the sight of Allah, right? So knowing that, the only one who knows what our deeds are is Allah. So that means for us down here, we have to treat each other the same based on the fact that we are created by Allah, without making divisions based on what people look like, because Allah already says it's not what you look like that matters. That is not the ultimate. That is not what ultimately matters. But in terms of what we're dealing with today, what the Black community has a problem with is what they perceive as unfair treatment by law enforcement towards Black community. Now, I don't like to say communities of color, because I can't speak on behalf of other communities of color. What I can say is what happens in Black communities. And obviously, when you have human beings, police officers, who have firearms as a part of their uniform, they're going to, at some point, make a mistake and kill someone that they shouldn't, shoot someone that they shouldn't, use force that is over the top when they shouldn't. And of course, police officers do this to everybody, not just Black people. And of course, they do it to white people more than anybody else, because they are the overwhelming majority of the population. So with all that out of the way, the fact that it happens to Black people at a higher rate relative to our percentage of the population is the problem. It says that something is wrong. And what is that something, right? Is it the way that these officers perceive Black people? It is the way that they think about Black people. That is only a question that they can answer. But what we can say is that we need to make change in the way that police officers police. And I believe that there are many ways to go about protesting and bringing attention to the plight of the African American community in terms of their relationship with police. And I believe there's also, you have to make a distinction between protesters, rioters, and looters, right? Especially looters. I think you can take looters out of the equation, because I believe when you allow looters into the equation, it allows people to take attention off of what is really the issue at hand. We have black people, especially, but also people of other colors, cultures, religions, creeds, however you want to delineate the pie, who are very upset about another death of a black person by the hands of police, and a death of someone who was innocent of any crime that was punishable by death, right? One, a police officer never has the right, well, I won't say never has the right, but is not the judge or jury. So they cannot kill you or punish you because they believe you committed a crime, right? So, but also there was no crime committed in this case, even if there was one committed, that would be punishable by any death penalty at all. So there we know that George Floyd's death was unjust. But not even to that point, the manner in which the arrest occurred, right? The way the officer conducted himself. And I believe that one thing that police officers need to understand is that you are seen as the good guys by many people, and you're seen as the bad guys by many people. And what do I mean by that? When I'm in court picking a jury for a trial, there's a question that's asked to the jury, to the members of the jury, prospective jury panel. The two questions on the questionnaire: are you more likely to believe the testimony of a police officer solely because they are a police officer? Some people they put yes for that. The other question is, are you less likely to believe the testimony of a police officer solely because they are a police officer? Many people put no, yes for that, right? So answering yes to either of those questions is both wrong, right? Because everybody should be judged on the merits of their testimony, not on what they do for a living, right? However, the people who answer that question, yes, they say, I would be more likely to believe a police officer. Every time they're asked why, their response is because they are a police officer. They're supposed to tell the truth. They expect them to tell the truth because they are supposed to be the good guys. And I think the key to understanding the anger of Black America is you cannot say that police officers are good guys and then give them a pass for acting like bad guys. Police can't do what bad guys can do. Why? One, they're professionals. They're supposed to be trained professionals, and there's a way that trained professionals conduct themselves that is different than how a normal human being will conduct themselves. And I'll just talk about the George Floyd case in particular, because many of us probably have seen the video of the officer with his knee on his neck. The officer alleges that they were trying to put George Floyd inside of their patrol car. He was struggling with them, so they put him on the ground to get control of him. And as a normal person, you may be frustrated by someone who doesn't give you what you want or doesn't do what you want when you believe you have authority over them. It's like a child. You tell a child to do something, they don't do it, it frustrates you. You tell a subordinate to do something, they drag their feet, they don't get it done, it frustrates you. But you cannot act out just in any way you want. So in this case, from what I saw in the video, it seemed that the officer was upset that George Floyd struggled with him, as he alleges, and he sat his knee on his neck as he pled for them to get off him because he couldn't breathe. What did the officer do? He put his hands in his pocket and he just stared off into space and kept his knee there until he ultimately caused his death. Now, why did he do that? He did it because he was frustrated. He was upset, maybe. I don't want to make any I don't want to assume why he did it, because it could have been completely criminal and he wanted to kill him. I don't know. But the point is, he wasn't conducting himself like a professional. When professionals go outside of what they're supposed to do, you end up with these type of situations. Now, why is a police officer, a trained police officer, acting in a manner that is unprofessional? Well, many people in the black community would say that is because he was dealing with a black person. So he wasn't behaving in a professional manner, which led to the death of Mr. Floyd. So I want to get back to the point I was making earlier about the looters, because that is something that everyone has been talking about, right? It has become the talk of the town. We have people who agree with the protest defending looters, and people who are against the protest using the looters as a reason why they're against it. And what I like to say is that the looters have nothing to do with the protest. They are selfish opportunists. I don't believe there are people there who are protesting the death of George Floyd, who care about the death of George Floyd, or are out there because they feel anger about another injustice done to someone just because of the color of their skin. I believe there are people who are there using this opportunity of this protest, this opportunity to destroy, and they're using it to steal. They're feeding their own nefs, right? Think about it from this perspective. If you lost a loved one and you were walking down the street, you're sad, you're distraught, you're emotional. If you saw an open door with money on the ground inside that door, do you think in that moment of grief, that moment of anger, you just walk inside happily and steal that money and walk away? No, that money would mean nothing to you. That opportunity wouldn't even be an opportunity to you. You're already preoccupied with something much more dear to your heart and much more important than some financial gain that you could get. So a lot of these people who are out there on the in this protest, protesting this, they are they are deeply emotionally involved and invested in seeing change in our country. So I don't believe they should be maligned because other people who are not as deeply invested are looting. So we should never mix looting, especially as Muslims, right? Looting is not a special, it's not a special way of stealing. It's theft, right? It's theft that occurs during a riot, right? So it's not some special get out of jail free card. No, I was looting, I wasn't stealing. You're free to go, right? And as Muslims, we know it's wrong, and we can call it wrong without um, violating our duty to stand up for justice as Muslims. So I think as Muslims who feel a deep pain for what our brothers and sisters are going through in this country as Black Americans, um, we also have to keep our principles, right? Because one of the main blessings of our ummah is that we were blessed with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and everything that we're going through, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going through, right? Every pain we can feel, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt that. So he not what that means is that he gave us the blueprint on how to deal with it. He taught us how we should behave, and how we shouldn't behave, right? And he taught us that there are limits you don't transgress, and the reason we don't transgress those limits is because this is a test. It's from Allah, right? Everything that's being put upon us is from Allah. So there's no reason to transgress the limits because we know that Allah is giving us this test to see if we will transgress the limits. As Allah says, do you think you will say you believe without being tested? But you can't just say you're Muslims. You can't go through the month of Ramadan, do all the fasting, pat yourself in the back, and then just violate all our principles and everything we were trying to strengthen in ourselves throughout the last 30 days. Um, so I think that as Muslims, we should work with each other. We should work with our non-Muslim um, brothers and sisters in what is good. As non-Black Muslims, if you are not a Black Muslim, you should talk to your Black Muslim friends. You should talk to other Black people to find out what they feel. You should ask them about what they feel. One of the, as I sat here and Dr. Shadi mentioned what I do for a living, even as I was a prosecutor, district attorney before this, an assistant DA before I became an assistant United States attorney. And even then, I'm from the inner city. I live in Philadelphia, and many of my friends and family still live in the inner city. So I have to drive through the inner city. And even now, when I drive in the inner city, if a police officer pulls up behind me, I get a little anxious. I wouldn't say afraid, but I do get anxious. I feel like, am I going to get pulled over? I didn't do it. I know I didn't do anything. There's nothing. I always check for my wallet. I have my wallet. Do I have my ID out? Am I ready to go? Where's my paperwork? Whether that is a real fear, whether it is something that's come about because of all the news I watch, I don't know, right? But I know I'm not alone when I say that. There are a lot of black men who feel this way when they're driving and the police pull up behind them. But also, we have to remember who we are, and we have to remember who's in charge. We have to always remind ourselves of that. What do we do going forward to make change? I think that you have to use, what we need really is to fortify our community. We are Muslims overall who all come from different backgrounds and all come from different places. And Allah created us this way, He says, so that we may know each other. So how well do you know the plight of African American Muslims? How well do you know the plight of those Muslims who made it safe for everyone else to live as Muslims in this country? It was my mother, my aunts, and the grandmothers and grandfathers of some of my friends who were wearing hijab when Muslims weren't on TV, right? So imagine when somebody sees a hijab nowadays, they're like, oh, that's one of the Muslims. But imagine before, when nobody saw hijabs on TV, like, what the hell is she doing? Excuse me. What is she wearing, right? So the those who came before us in this country, our predecessors of Islam in America, I'm talking about in the modern day, in the modern age, they made it easier for us. And it is those black men and black women who you should go talk to and ask questions of and listen to them and learn about what they go through on a regular basis. There is a feeling that racism, when I was growing up as a Muslim, I felt that there was no racism in Islam. And that's true. I still believe that today. But I found that there was racism amongst Muslims, right? Because we are affected by the community around us. We are affected by where we come from. We are affected by our society. We are affected by what we watch on TV and what we do. And before we can look out and speak out about what happens in the greater community, we have to, as Muslims, be the example and correct the mistakes in our own community. We have to be able to stand up and be accounted when we're asked about the racial unity in our own community. That is the most important thing that we can do as Muslims. Never fear the circumstances. We have a lot going on right now. We have a pandemic, we have riots, we have more injustice, but that's been going on, year after year. You can go to each year and find a case where a black male or black female has been unjustly killed by a police officer in circumstances that were quite strange, or just downright wrong. But we have to make sure that those same situations are happening in our own community on a lower level. We have to make sure that we are not treating people differently because of the way they look. We have to make sure that we're not treating people differently because of where they come from, whether they come from the poorest of environments or the most privileged of environments. We have to remember that we're all Muslims, we're all creations of Allah, and we all have rights that Allah has given us, and none of us knows who is the best among us except Allah. Um, so I know I've said a lot. I wasn't completely prepared to speak to you, but so I just spoke from the heart, and hopefully they were helpful. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments or corrections. I'm more than happy to hear those.
Uh, Thank you very much. And it was very insightful. And I have a question, actually.
Mhm.
You're a lawyer, so you know a lot about the power of persuasion and the techniques of getting rid of issues and persuading people away from certain focal points. As one lawyer is presenting an evidence and the opposite lawyer is trying to persuade the jury away from that evidence. So my question is, don't you think people have to be savvy about, we have to start getting to be being more savvy about how we understand what's going on in the media? Because to me, at first glance, very easily, the looters is nothing other than people trying to split the conversation now or divide the conversation. So to me, I can't help but think that this is a completely intentional technique.
I think that one thing you have to be careful with the media. Not, I don't believe that the media intentionally gets things wrong, but I believe that they will, in order to get a story out there, get things wrong, right? Without intending it. But it's just not, they don't have all the facts.
Mhm.
And it's because they're people, right? These are human beings who have jobs, deadlines, and pressure to get ratings. This is all about entertainment. So there's a protest is more entertaining than everyday news.
Mhm.
What's more entertaining than a protest? A riot. What's more entertaining than a riot? Looting, because it's action, it's violence, it's destruction, and our I heard from somewhere a while ago that our brains are designed to seek out danger in order to keep us from it, right?
Mm.
So if you drive by a crash on the side of the road, your mind, you look at it, right? There's always a bottleneck because everybody wants to see the destruction. So I think one part of it is they're just trying to get ratings, so they show you the looting because it's more entertaining than a protest.
Mhm.
But also, when I was in the DA's office, I know I had a case. I was in the charging unit, so I was the one who the detectives would call. They would ask for, they would give me facts and ask if they could make an arrest or what else they needed. So I had a case. I won't get into the facts, but they didn't have everything they needed. So I said, get this and call back. Later on, I saw the news and they had it completely wrong.
Hmm.
It was completely sensationalized. Now, whether they did that on purpose or they took the facts they had and ran with it, it was completely wrong. So you can't believe everything you hear on the news because believe me, they don't have all the facts because nobody wants to give them all the facts, right?
Mhm.
So I think that um, there's one good thing we can take from our current president is that fake news, all news, you just can't take it as like the golden word, right?
Mhm.
It's all of it's not real. So I think you have to be careful when you're watching the news what you are focusing on, because again, there might have been 10, 10 groups protesting all around the city. In one area there may be someone looting. I'm not saying that's the case, but just come with me on this journey. One group is looting. If the all the news cameras can go to that group,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the one that's the action. And you'll think that there's looting, they're not protesting. So you just have to be careful with the way that you follow the media and watch on TV because again, that the news is about entertainment and about ratings. They're trying they need to get sponsors. They have to pay for those sponsors, or they get money for those sponsors. They have to entice sponsors to come to them. They do that by getting viewers. How do we get viewers? Right? By entertaining people.
Mhm.
That's how we get viewers. So you have to be wary of that.
And the and viewership by nature is lazy, in the sense that unlike research, which is active, viewership, when you're a viewer, you're lazy by nature. And oftentimes when do people view the news? Most people view the news at the end of the day, where he wants to actually just shut his mind off and someone tell me. So when it's lazy, you're going to appeal to the lowest sort of elements of a person, in which a person wants to see something wild. They don't want to think. You're sitting and when do they put the news on? Usually 7 p.m., 8 p.m. All the world news comes on. What are people doing? They're sipping their tea on the couch, meaning I don't want to think anymore, right? When your audience is in that frame of mind, they're going to naturally be attracted to the channel that's got the fire, right? That's got the crowd. That's the channel, not the channel that someone's telling you to think. And let's look at these evidences and weigh them. Now, you don't want to weigh. You've been thinking from 9 to 5. Now you just want to unwind. So the news, when they cover that, people are going to provoke anything. The news has to cover it. It'll be because all their competitors are covering it, right?
Exactly.
You can't be left out. So even when the news is telling, because I know that someone might think in the back of their mind, well, I saw the looting happening myself. It was true, but the source of that event could very well be a party or a group or someone who wants to take attention off of another issue. And the best way to do it is to bring something so phenomenal, so bizarre, so crazy, you can't help but looking at it, right? Yeah. Magicians do this all the time, right? He starts talking to you about like an egg or something like that, and then something crazy goes on over there. Boom, he swapped the egg out for a quarter. He said, "Oh, look, it's a quarter." So it's a trick, right? So these are persuasion techniques.
Think about this. Yeah, it's interesting because with the media doing so much about this case, going back to George Floyd and the officer who killed him, it's going to be so hard for them to find a jury. First of all, it's the attorney general is trying the case now. I don't know how that's going to work in terms of the jury pool, but it's going to be so hard to find a jury in that city or that area that hasn't heard about this case or all those facts. I don't know where they're going to go or where they're going to pull their jury pool from in order to find a pool of jurors who have not heard enough that they can be fair and judge the case. Now, what that does is the further you get away from a city environment, the further you get away from the people in that community actually being the jurors to judge his guilt or his innocence. Another point is we have to be very careful as Muslims not to judge someone based on other people's actions, right? So even in this case with this police officer, I'll never say he killed George Floyd because he was black. I don't know that, right? I don't know why he did what he did. I don't know why he put his knee on his neck and stayed there. It definitely could have been because he was a black man and he hated them, right? It also could have been because he thought he's a criminal, giving him a hard time. He doesn't like that because I'm the police and you listen to me, or this is what I do. I exert my power over you. Whatever the reason may be, it's wrong. But I think that we have to be careful as Muslims not to rush to judge individuals off of the actions of groups, which is the main thing that happens to minorities and majority communities, right? Muslims know that better than most people. Black people know that better than everyone, right? In this country, we're always judged by the actions of our group. We're all lumped in. And that is also why we believe that the police department in most major cities have this type of volatile interaction with the black community because we're all lumped in as a group, right? And it's very dangerous and it's wrong for police to do it and it's wrong for civilians to do it because we have many African American police officers, we have many Muslim police officers, right, that are trying to be the best people they can be as police officers, right? So I think that we have to be fair and balanced in the way we react because we have a standard to live up to, and we have an example that we are supposed to be. We cannot. Um, we're not the community who says, "Well, they did this,
Mhm.
so that's why we're doing it," right?
That's Jahiliyyah.
Yeah. What about when they did that? What about when they did this? We don't
Yeah.
worry about them because they're not our prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Our prophet is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he set the limits. He set the example of how we behave, even in the face of someone who doesn't play by any rules, right? Um, we have to play by the rules. So I think it's very important for us to remember that we can't judge people based off. We can't. We're not the judges of hearts. Allah is. We don't know what lies within the heart of someone. Um, so I think we need to be careful without knowing all the facts to jump to conclusions, because many times when you see all the facts, you get a different picture. And I'm just speaking from experience, right? When I have cases, I have the entire view, and then people who may have seen something in the news, you see them say things that just aren't true. You see people outside, just regular people who've heard about the case, who say things that are just untrue, completely untrue, and you're wondering how they even reached that opinion, how they got, why they think that's true. So it's important not to don't believe everything you see on the news or that you see on social media. I think in this case, George Floyd in particular, we have a Muslim attorney general who is charging the case. Attorney General, I believe his name's Ellison in Minneapolis, and I think he has a strong case from based on what I see. But I don't, like I said, I don't know everything. But we'll see what happens.
Speaking of our limits, we have a great advantage as Muslims. When you said that, we should look inside of our own community. Whenever we see an ill outside, it should trigger inside of us. Uh, do I have the same thing? Or do we as an ummah have the same thing? And this is not mimicking people. Some people say that you're mimicking the society. This is not mimicking the society. This is, oh, you got my attention on this subject. I don't like what I'm seeing there. Just as like I'm pointing with one finger, well, three fingers are pointing back, as that famous saying goes. Do we have that? So when we look inside of our own community, I think we have a great advantage that no other community has. That in our aqidah, we don't just look at each other. You said look at people as individuals. We also take it one step up. This is abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're both created from the same source, created by the same Khaliq, and will be judged by the same Khaliq. And he's watching you now and will ever be watching you past, present, future, and knows what's in your hearts. And will only be judging you by your character, your deeds, and your hearts. As the Prophet ﷺ said, he doesn't look at your images or your appearances, but he looks at your deeds and at your hearts. So when we look at this, and we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our starting point, when that's our starting point, then all of a sudden this path can actually become much faster because we're not going at the level of political dialogue, social dialogue, even just individual dialogue. We're going at the level of sacred dialogue now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on our mind when we think about each other, when we look at each other, when we talk to each other. And we talk about the mercy of human beings on the animals, right? People say how merciful the Sharia is on animals. Well, what about amongst us as human beings, right? So in Islamic law, if you want to destroy a building so that you raise a building, tear it down to build a new one, there has to be an inspection. There has to be inspection of animals. There has to be noise that's made so the animals leave. So subhanAllah, innocent animals, what about innocent human beings? So I heard your adhan went off. It looks like I'm sitting on the western horizon. Yours looks like you're sitting on the eastern. You're on the western horizon because it's a bit lighter out there, and I'm sitting on the eastern horizon. Even though we're in the same time zone, it looks like Maghrib is in. So thank you so much for coming on. Jazakallah khairan. I know how hectic it must be. I can only imagine how hectic it must be in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the type of things that must be on your mind. So I really appreciate you taking a couple minutes out now from your schedule and from your family, really. So I really should thank your family as well for taking the time out, sacrificing time with you. And I hope that, inshallah, after the coronavirus is over, that we could do this in person, inshallah, again, and continue this conversation.
Barakallahu feekum for having me. I appreciate it. If
All
I
right,
say
my pleasure.
anything wrong, it's from me. If I say anything correct, it's from Allah. Please make dua for me. Make dua for the community, for the Muslims. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's close with our dua before we get to Salat al-Maghrib and close out the stream. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A'udhu bi kalimatillahi at-tammati min sharri ma khalaq. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم تعصمت بذي العزة واعتصمت برب الملكوت وتوكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت اللهم اصرف عنا الوباء بلطفك يا لطيف إنك على كل شيء قدير تعصمت بذي العزة واعتصمت برب الملكوت وتوكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت اللهم اصرف عنا الوباء بلطفك يا لطيف إنك على كل شيء قدير تحصنت بذي العزة واعتصمت برب الملكوت وتوكلت على الحي الذي لا يموت اللهم اصرف عنا الوباء بلطفك يا لطيف إنك على كل شيء قدير وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله